Joining us to discuss more on this is Channel TV political correspondent Seun Okinbale. Thank you for joining us on Network Africa.
Thank you so much, Joke.
The president's return over the weekend was met with, high expectations on what he will finally tell Nigerians, and he did do that earlier today. His speech, do you think it met Nigerians' expectations?
First and foremost, I think we should look at what were the expectations of millions of Nigerians who were expecting the nation's #1 man to return to the country. First and foremost, a lot of people will think that it will talk about the status of his health status, what exactly was wrong with him. It did not do that. It did not mention. It just thanked Nigerians who has kept hope alive and who has kept faith with him and hoping that it will return. Thank goodness it was back. It's back, and a lot of Nigerians received him with joy. The fact that the nation's #1 man is back, our president is back. But if you look at some of the things that are on the front burner, in the nation right now, some of those issues is raised. Some of those issues affecting the unity of the nation were the priority from him. If you look at the speech, about 15 paragraphs, out of the 15 paragraphs, about 8 paragraphs were dedicated to the issues of unity. That shows how important and how touching those kind of issues are for him to have spent that time, those words on the issue of unity shows that it was important for him, which drove him to the issues of restructuring, the issues of unity, the clamoring in the south and the northern region of the country, and he put about on the tables of the Council of State and the National Assembly. So if you look at the expectations of Nigeria, it may not have met some of the expectations, and to an extent it touched on some very genuine issue, and a lot of people would think that to a large extent, some of the song that any elder statesman in this country will sing is that there is no need for divisiveness in this country. Unity of this nation is paramount and important.
We did, when you and I were talking, at the weekend as the president was coming back to the country, we did, look at whether he would still continue to work from home or not, and this is what has happened. So when do we expect, the president to really get back to office to, start doing his thing?
From the information we get from the presidency today, that the president is back on his desk, is officially written and signed to inform the National Assembly letter informing them that he's back at work, officially saying that he's back to the saddle of leadership in the country. He's handed over power to the vice president who has been acting in his stead for over 100 days now. The vice president today, we understand, has met with him, has briefed him. There are a lot of issues that the vice president will be telling him. He met with him at some point when he has spent about 70 days or so in London. That kind of briefing will be different from the kind of briefing that he would have gotten this morning. And we should be seeing some more activities of the president in the days to come.
Let's take a look at what you just said now about, the weight of the president's speech. There was a lot of talk about Nigeria not, being divided by, probably hate speeches and people that say that they want to secede and, all those talks, and vis-a-vis, security in Nigeria. I know the president also talked about the Boko Haram issue and insecurity in Nigeria. What do you think is more weighty now, getting Nigerians to be united or dealing with the security matters? Because both are important issues, but one is clearly outweighing the other.
Both will go hand in hand. One of the major priorities of any government is to protect the lives and property of Nigerians and the integrity of the nation. So it's going to be important for him because one of the cardinal objectives of his government is security. Boko Haram in the front of that agenda, and he did realize that the Boko Haram insurgents are getting some level of if you call it a resurgence, kind of. So he is very concerned with that and said whatever successes that has been achieved in the past 18 months, there needs to be consolidation on those issues. if the nation is not together, is much more an insecurity issue than any kind of security that we may be talking about. So uprising here and there needs to be politically handled,
yes,
and also constitutionally and legally also tackled.
Thank you so much for that, political correspondent Sheon Okinbaloye on Network Africa.
Thank you.
Let's move on now. For the first time in almost 4 decades, Angolans head to the polls to vote for a new president. The ruling MPLA is fielding Lourenco after long-term leader Jose Eduardo dos Santos steps down as president. The main opposition, Unitas Isais Samakuva, says that he is willing to form a coalition government with other opposition parties after elections next Wednesday.
With Angola in the midst of an economic crisis caused by a fall in oil prices, the opposition is hoping to improve its tally, though a lack of credible polling in the country makes the result unpredictable. Angola goes to the polls on the 23rd of August, and the ruling People's Movement for the Liberation of Angola is fielding a different candidate for the first time in 38 years. 62-year-old João Lourenco steps into the shadow of Africa's second longest-running leader, José dos Santos, who is not running for president of the country anymore, but retains control of the powerful ruling party. Lourenco will face dos Santos's long-time rival, leader of the opposition National Union for the Total Independence of Angola, UNITA, Isaias Samavuka. Samakuva says he is willing to form a coalition government with other opposition parties after elections next Wednesday if MPLA loses power for the first time since independence in 1975. Dos Santos led an oil-backed economic boom and the reconstruction of infrastructure devastated by a 27-year civil war that ended in 2002. Then the country slipped into recession last year, with the economy contracting 3.6%, according to government data that was published online in April, but later removed.
People say Angola is a very rich country. But rich in what sense? We have potential richness, but it is not real wealth. Real wealth happens when there's serious investment in education and health. Countries like Japan have invested a lot in the education sector, and they are what they are now.
Critics accuse dos Santos of mismanaging Angola's oil wealth and making an elite, mostly his family and political allies, vastly rich in a country ranked amongst the world's most corrupt. Angolans in the streets of the capital, Luanda, are cautiously optimistic of the prospects of life under a new president for the first time in nearly 4 decades.
Coming up on Network Africa. South Africa's main opposition Democratic Alliance calls for a parliamentary inquiry into the government's decision to give diplomatic immunity to Zimbabwe's First Lady, Grace Mugabe.